All right, I'm Mike with the In-Groove, and I'm with Shawn, Britton, Krieg, Wunderlich, and Rob LoVerde.
Yes, that's right.
I nailed that. I'm very proud of myself.
Got it.
With Mobile Fidelity, and I've actually been here for a few hours doing a little bit of a tour of the facility, and they've agreed to answer some questions for me. So thank you guys. I appreciate you being able.
Is this under oath?
This is under, well, it's under the oath of, yeah. Moving on. Okay, so a lot of hubbub, a lot of people, a lot of questions. I myself had questions. You guys have been really forthcoming in answering them. I appreciate that. But I guess I'm going to ask the most in-demand question right now. And a lot of people, I feel, are under the assumption that everything you guys have done and everything you've ever done has been from analog. I came out on video and said I believe you guys were doing some things from digital. And I want to ask you that question. Are you doing everything analog, or do we have any digital in the process?
There is digital. We're collecting tapes from
varying locations.
Never mind. I'll let you take that one.
You take that one.
I'll take that one. I'm glad you asked that question, Mike.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So, yes, we do have the capability of cutting AAA, as it were, which, by the way, the SPARS code is an outdated thing, but we will find a way to come up with a system that's similar to SPARS code. But we do still have that capability, and labels do still send us tapes, or we go fetch them and courier them here, and we can cut all analog. This is an all analog mastering chain, but we can also cut from digital. And I think what you're getting at in the question, if I can be so presumptuous,
Go ahead.
if I may, is that is there any digital in the chain? We do have 4X DSD, and bog standard DSD is 256 times the sample rate of a CD. We transfer at 4X DSD, which is 11.3 megahertz. Is that right? The sample rate?
11.2, yeah. Close.
Close enough.
Very
yeah,
close.
Very close, but no cigar.
It's still in the decimal point. It's always the...
Damn it.
So what's the process?
Oops.
Walk me through a particular album. Let's take Santana's Abraxas, probably the most famous record you guys have ever done. What is the process for mastering a title like that?
I have no idea, Mike. So in that particular example, sorry, I should have been a comedian. No, I shouldn't have. We licensed that title from Sony Music, and through the licensing arrangement, the tape was made available to us there in New York. We will fly a technician there. It's usually Rob LoVerde, or I will go with a Studer A80 with the Tim DePervicini reproducer.
Similar machine behind you.
Yeah, right. Although that is a preview machine that has two sets of reproducer electronics, or repros, tape repros we call them. So we'll, very similar to that machine, we transport it in its own road case, and then we will bring a computer and the 4X DSD analog to digital converters with it. And they made the Santana Abraxas original tape, and we always verify the tapes ahead of time. So sometimes we will transfer only after we've authenticated the tapes. And that's, sorry, but these questions lead into other avenues, so you may have to put me back on track. But to make it an original master recording, that's what this means. The OMR is the stripe across the top. So Rob or I, typically, we get scans of the tapes ahead of time. We get there to New York, we get the tapes in our hands, and there are varying ways of authenticating a master tape that we don't need to get into the granular details on that, as it were. But trust us, we're professionals. We authenticate the tape. And if we can't authenticate every song on that tape, Then we have another label that across the stripe, it will say Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab.
So if you run into a situation to where you feel that every take on that tape -1 is the original master take, but the one you're unsure of, that would fall under the master, the Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab banner.
Stripe, correct.
So original master recording is and only used when you know that you are starting with the base source material of the original tape.
And OMR. That being said, we have found tapes later with the correct song, and that's one of the beauties of the direct stream digital transfers, is that we can assemble a master later of all the original takes. Now, you and I had a discussion earlier, which you have sworn never to divulge, about an artist that we have had alternate mixes. And because the commercial versions have been compressed, it's sometimes difficult to listen to the original master and it sounds like an alternate mix. It's not. There's no compression on it. There's no limiting. So it takes some reverse engineering to figure out that we do indeed have the right mixes. And that can cause some confusion with some labels and that they think that we've used alternate, or we've been accused of remixing in the past, and we didn't.
There's no remixing equipment here.
That's right. It's
so
all analog, all real, all the time.
One thing that I want to throw in, because to the point of your question about what we do and when we have to go to Sony to capture master tapes, is that what we are really endeavoring to do is to create a mobile fidelity environment in their space where they're allowing their masters to reside. And so all we really need from them is a power outlet, and the rest is our equipment.
You're shipping over.
That we ship over from here, that we use here, and that and also a technician who works here as well. And so really we're basically, instead of, if we can't bring the tape here, we bring here to the tape. And so so we're trying to really optimize the work under the conditions that are specified sometimes by the record label. And so the less is more credo still stands in that, minimal cable lengths, no unnecessary circuitry in the system, and the like, to get the cleanest, flattest transfer that we can then bring back here to work on from the mastering end. So the work off-site is all about transfer. It's not really about any editorializing. It's about just creating a literal clone of the master as neutrally as possible, and then bringing that clone here to say, okay, this is as if we had the master tape here at Mobile Fidelity. Okay. So that is what we do with this, is necessitated.
Well put.
Thank you.
One of the things that we do, without getting into too much detail again, is we try in our transfers, I think we achieve, we don't just try, we recreate what the original recorder alignment was. So that requires a skill set that we learned from Stan Ricker himself. These techniques have been handed down. I want to emphasize that the MoFi that you know and love from back in the day, from the 70s, that methodology has not changed. The technology has, certainly, and Mobile Fidelity is, no pun intended, on the cutting edge of technology in that we keep up with new trends, etc. But we have that same ethos, that same way of transferring the tapes to bring back. And Krieg Wunderlich has been doing most of the LP mastering lately from these tape transfers that Rob and I do off-site. And yes, there are more than one, what did I want to say, label, location. We've
so
literally...
one particular label. You're going to many different locations.
We've been around the world, literally.
Yes.
We've been around the world
you'll take your
with our equipment.
And you go to where you can get the gear,
we do these transfers.
the
Now, we do still get tapes from some record labels and do the mastering here when we can.
And there are times many times where we have to transfer a master tape that is here to digital, to high resolution DSD digital, and cut the lacquer from that transfer.
So your guys is, and I'm trying to understand what the thought process here. So it's not necessarily because you can't cut from the original tape. That's why you do DSD. You guys, from a mastering perspective, you feel sometimes you can achieve better results doing the quad DSD.
That is correct.
You
yes.
can.
I would say absolutely. If you look at it, if I may, if I'm not interrupting you, Krieg. In the case of records like Pretenders, first album, Marvin Gaye, Let's Get It On. These are tapes that each track had a set of calibration tones just for that song. It would have been literally impossible to accurately transfer the audio of each song to a record live, playing from a tape machine. The best way to do that is to say, okay, we're going to align for track one, side one, track one, transfer that to digital, then then on to the second song with its own calibration tones. I'm fairly convinced, I might be going on a limb here, but in the case of the Pretenders first album exists as about 12 reels of tape. I believe there's 12 songs on that album, maybe 11. But however many songs are on that album, that's how many reels there are. And each of those reels is in some cases from a different studio. That album was from Eden Studios, Wessex Studios, and the song Brass in Pocket was from Air Studios. And that song needed to be very sped. You could not cut that from standard 15 IPS tape speed. That needed to be sped up a little bit to match the original product. Yeah. So these are things that you cannot really do accurately. That's a key word here, accurately, live as you cut a side of an album. The way to optimize that process is to transfer it to a digital medium, which sort of freezes it in time, and it's now a reliable source for our mastering, and that is preferred by us, and we've done listening tests that prove our suspicions. We won't just simply go on theory.
So was there a point in time where you did tape transfers, did DSD transfers, brought them back and compared them, made decisions based on them? Because I'm assuming if you have the ability to bring over your own equipment, your own reel-to-reel, you have the ability to do transfers. Was there a time where you were able to do that, compare those?
We did
compare
comparisons here of DSD against various other recording methods.
Sure.
And,
we spent about half of our time testing, probably almost as much time testing as actually mastering.
And doing interviews now.
Not to mention.
Well, one of the things I noticed that was actually pretty shocking to me is the amount of test pressings that are everywhere. And it really does seem like you have just endless cuts of an album. So you seem to spend quite a bit of time. I mean, can you tell me about some of these titles and some of the time that it's taken? It seems like some of these titles have been a little more difficult than others.
Without a doubt.
To where?
That would be a great question.
There are multiple versions of a lot of the titles. Some of them you can get it the first time. The song's great. It's perfect.
Boom.
But there have been plenty of times when, no, this could perhaps be a little bit better. You get it back from the pressing plant, it doesn't sound exactly like you wanted it to, and you have to readjust to get it to exactly where you want it.
So let me ask you this from an inner workings perspective. I mean, are you pretty at will to be able to redo this? I mean, you guys are pressured by deadlines. I mean, what's the process? I mean, are you given the time needed to get it right?
Well, the process is we get it right. Yes, we take the time needed to get it right.
Absolutely.
It's more than just doing a ref cut and listening to that, because a ref cut on a lacquer is not going to sound the same as what you get back from the pressing plant.
It doesn't.
So you want to be able to cut the lacquer, send the lacquer off, plate it, press it, make your decisions based on that.
The final vinyl.
Final vinyl, not a reference lacquer.
Right. Correct. Because we're getting down to the point that we're a dB here at some frequency, add a half a dB, cut a half a dB. There's far more difference than that. between what the ref lacquer is going to sound like and what the final pressing is going to sound like.
Can I break in for a second here? I don't want to anticipate questions that you're going to get to, but getting those original tape transfers right makes a greater difference than some of the differences between analog and digital. Because, and I'm not going to name any mastering houses, there's a lot of people doing great stuff out there and a lot of labels. It's not like the old days of MoFi where it was easier to redo an album and the commercial versions were lacking. But that was of an era, of a certain sound. Now, the differences that you can get with varying digital formats, I'm wording this very poorly, you might have to edit this part out. The DSD transfers that we do are accurate representations of that tape. Now, if somebody's mastering at a commercial mastering house and they're paying $500 an hour, they don't have the time to swap out cables or, as I mentioned earlier today, adjust Dolby's in 0.2 of a dB increments until you get that alignment spot on just right. So we have the luxury of time, and that difference that we make is what makes the Mobile Fidelity records so great. I hate to beat our own drum, but
I think that one thing I'd like to add to this is just, I know that this revelation of Mobile Fidelity cutting from transfers made to digital is sort of anathema to some of our purist fans. And I understand that strictly from what you might read on a piece of paper. But the truth is that us cutting from digital, digital transfers that we ourselves made is not an example of us losing our way. It's actually an example of us adhering to it, adhering to the purist aesthetic and perfecting things beyond anything in the past. And the past goes back now 45 years.
Preserving the tape.
Absolutely preserving the tape.
I don't want to speak for anybody and what their opinion is. I mean, I think the results are pretty accurate. I've been on record many times. Some of the records you guys have done are my favorite all-time records, sound-wise, presentation-wise. I use them as demo records. I'm glad you guys agreed to do this because I think for most people, it's just a matter of tell me what I'm buying. And I'm glad you guys are telling me what's out there and telling everybody else what's out there. I think as a whole, most people are pleased with the results and appreciate what you guys are doing. But people, they just want to know specifically. Maybe you're not going to go into great detail on everything you do and how you do it, but you guys have been pretty good about just giving the approach you guys are taking. And I mean, I appreciate that. I've mentioned in a lot of videos in the past for transparency in labels, because there is a lot of wordsmithing going on with labels in general, to where they'll use the word analog 25 times. There's no analog in the chain. So I've actually called for labels to start being more forthcoming with just information. And I had a conversation with you guys, and I mean, you guys seem pretty on board with that. I mean, where are you guys at in being able to make that happen?
The transparency?
Yes.
Oh.
Tell me how in the future guys are going to be able to know specifically what they're buying.
Well, I would say we're definitely going to come up with some sort of a labeling that we've been talking about, in terms of, we don't know if that labeling is going to exist on the website or if that is going to exist on the product. That is to be determined by us. But what it will do is it will greatly increase transparency to the consumer, because they deserve to know what they're buying. That is true. And I think we're all interested in that for sure. I certainly wouldn't want someone buying something that they did not feel confident in. Mobile Fidelity has been a label to trust for 45 years. We certainly don't want that true image to change, for that to become something all of a sudden, oh, it's MoFi. I don't know whether it's analog or digital. And being that is something that the customer has chosen to focus on, we have to acknowledge that. We have to recognize that.
But still, I mean, and I would say going forward, you guys are still you're under the philosophy, whether you get an analog tape in-house or not, you guys are going to put it out in whichever way comes out the best.
100%.
Of course.
And I mean,
Always.
you're testing that.
Mhm.
Always.
So it's not
Case by case, title for title.
every title. And I'm guessing quite a bit here by the amount of test pressings I'm seeing.
Yeah.
You guys could have one heck of a record show in this room, by the way, if I do say so myself.
Oh, gosh.
But
Try not to salivate.
I'm
Mike.
trying.
Exactly.
That's the record collector in me. I know you know.
Is
You
it
guys
worth
just-
more if it has scribbled comments on the
Comments
jacket?
are actually
Only if
good.
they're
Everybody
yours.
wants comments.
Only if they're Kriegs.
But I had a chance to listen to a few things, and I got to say, I am quite impressed with some of the stuff that is coming out. And I am looking forward to it more so. I was a little worried on a couple titles that were announced, and I kind of felt that things coming out really needed to hit it out of the park after this past week, and I do feel a lot more confident in that. Not that that matters, but that is the case. But I am glad you guys are willing to put that out and answer this question. So I kind of feel like that hits most of it on the nail. As far as, was there any point in time where you guys started doing this? I mean, is this going back now 15 years, 20 years? Because I think the rumor that's been going out, and maybe I had a little bit of something to do with this, is there was a point in time where this
Thanks,
started.
Mike.
You're welcome. I mean, this is something that's been going on. I mean, you guys have been doing the DSD for some time now.
We'd have to look back at the notes, I think, because there was sort of a great overlap. Things are not really static in the music industry. It's not like, okay, starting with MFSL 1-301.
It's a case by case.
It's case by case, and things change for us from the record label end and from the technological end. And
From the pressing
that's
end,
really
we're
from the,
waiting,
not to mention.
waiting for pressings to come in.
One of the biggest changes is that labels started realizing how valuable their masters were. There was a time when they had no qualms about sending masters all around the world, and masters would get lost, damaged, not by us, but
Right.
and labels didn't seem to realize the value of their masters, and now that pendulum has swung the other way. They're not letting the masters out of their sight, out of their immediate facilities. And so actually it's been quite some time that we have had to go on collecting trips.
So I asked you guys a little bit earlier. So a lot of the Miles Davis catalog, I mean, that's been extremely well reviewed by countless reviewers as, some of the best sounding Miles has ever come out, especially that 60s era Columbia stuff. Same thing, those were DSD.
Those were DSD.
Those were
Yes.
DSD.
Very kind of Sony Music to allow us access to the OMRs, that's original master recording, sorry, on those tapes. That it's astounding that we get access to the catalogs that we do. And because of our reputation, and I told you a story about a Bob Dylan tape that he specifically requested that we have access to.
Love and Theft.
Exactly
That was
right.
the one, right?
Yeah, that's not something that most people are aware of. But because we will make those trips and we'll bring specialized equipment and technicians to play it back. That was a really bad Yogi Bear imitation. In case you, boy, it's bad when you have to explain a joke.
I know. Sometimes
Yeah.
they fall flat. I've had that happen a few times, even recently.
Tough crowd in here. Man. Anyway, so that we do have access to that Miles Davis catalog, the Bob Dylan catalog, the crown jewels of the Sony Music catalog, as it were. It's astounding to me sometimes that we are allowed access like we are.
Gosh.
But again, we've got great gear, the Studer A80, and Krieg, who's a great repair tech himself, one of the best in California, if not the Western U.S., will tell you that these tape machines that we use are the best at handling, especially older tape stock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The
I think
A80s
Studers are pretty known.
tremendous
And I
machine.
think they're pretty well adopted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
the
the thing.
industry.
It's sort of like the transport. The sound doesn't come from the transport, as you know. You know, the transport is really about proper handling tape under proper tension. Krieg would probably be even better, of course, at explaining this. The sound comes from the reproducer, and we have what I believe for sure to be the finest reproducing amplifiers possible. Tim DeParapicini, rest in peace. You know, we were lucky to get his designs in here for the last, I think it's since 1998 was when he built his
Sounds about
first
right.
one.
Yeah.
And
The frequency response on those repros is
yeah.
off the charts. I
Unmatched.
mentioned to you earlier that we have captured things at more than triple the frequency response of human
Right.
hearing.
So Krieg, you maintain the gear here at the studio?
Yeah.
That's you. And yeah, it seems like you're doing, I mean, is it a collective effort between the two of you in the LP room? I mean, I see your initials on the ladder, so I'm assuming you're cutting them.
That happens. We do.
Cutting.
We do sometimes collaborate
Mhm.
on things, which
But
is fun.
It is a collaborative effort on a one step if you're doing the source. So you're going to start off the project, you're going to collect transfers of that original master tape. So you both kind of have a way, your hand
Mhm.
on a
Yeah,
lot.
could be
three of
different.
us. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be different phases of the process because
Mhm.
there are many. One of us could be tasked with the transfer of the master tape, someone else tasked with the cutting of the record. And there are times when, rarely are three of us in here. It's usually Krieg and Shawn or Krieg and I. But we do all have our hands in it. And
But what if it's a project you really are all about? You don't just huddle in here and hang out?
oh, that happens.
that's what I would be doing.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, it's like your
Absolutely.
favorite record comes
Yeah.
in.
So
One of the-
We're all, let's
absolutely.
listen.
You know,
Come on in and listen to this. What do
Yeah.
you think? That's a collaborative effort. We get the
question.
test pressings back from the plant. Okay, which one do you prefer?
right.
If that
Exactly.
often
So I think,
happens.
I gotta admit, coming in here, my conception was Jim Davis purchases Mobile Fidelity. This is a brand new company. This was coming into this. This was my conception. We got a brand new
Jim
company.
Davis is too smart for that.
But I gotta say, looking around this place, I'm seeing so many like relics of the past. You showed me stands.
What did he
original-
just call you?
I know. I
A
apologize. I
relic from
apologize.
the past.
But I'm seeing promotional material from the 80s. You showed me the mastering notes on the original Beatles transfers that were done in the 80s. And I mean, you guys have tremendous records. And I kind of, like I said, I came into this with the vibe that this was a whole new company. But it seems just from what I'm seeing here that there's a lot of history here.
Oh, yeah.
And you guys,
Everything from 1992 onward was mastered in either that room in just across the way or this one right here. Krieg, I believe you mastered Nirvana's Nevermind in the very room we're sitting in for gold CD and for LP.
when did you start Krieg for Mobile Fidelity?
86.
86. What about you, Shawn?
85.
What about you?
I'm a new guy.
You're the new guy.
I'm still the new guy. I
New.
started in almost 15 years ago in 2007. I'm still the newest hire.
You're the new guy. So
The new guy.
you got some legacy moved over from even the old location.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I
Oh,
was
yeah.
talking to you a little bit about this room, and you guys had, Krieg, you had a hand in building this, you were telling me.
Well,
Both Shawn
everything
and Krieg.
inside of the sheetrock, everything inside of the drywall is
So from the
was built
Faraday
by
cage
us.
inward.
We did.
Yeah.
We were putting linseed oil on these panels out in the warehouse.
soldering copper screening.
Boy,
and,
was that fun.
Yeah.
How long did it take you?
it was a couple of months.
Yeah, the screens alone, yeah. And
lot of
then the
time.
acoustic treatment, and then, of course, the mastering chain has improved, substantially since then. Well, originally in 85, we were in Petaluma,
Right.
and we moved up here in 92. They built this building for us.
92 CD was king,
Yes.
and it was kind of all about gold CDs. Although there was a big push to get rid of the lathe, and this room was built to accommodate a lathe, even though
I wish
It
I had bought
wasn't.
that VMS 70, man, back in the day.
But yeah, this definitely was set up with LP mastering in mind. We never wanted, even at the peak of the CD era, we kept the lathe. We had a pressing plant down the
That's
street.
right. Yeah.
That was pretty handy.
Lo-fi
Cutting-
manufacturing.
Cutting.
Getting it electroplated and then pressing your own, you could get results very quickly.
Very
And then, we did a lot of experimentation back then in different weights. So we chose 200 gram, if you remember those Anadisc 200s.
Yeah.
Even though some of them did exceed 200 grams, those were very difficult to press, those records. So getting those in here and comparing them to the ref lacquers was a very interesting process. And of course, we were looking at different vinyl formulations, which brings us to the modern day and our vinyl formulations and then the one steps. And
So when you guys took over the newest ownership, that was pretty much a CD market, SACD CD market at that point. So it seems like, and correct me here, but it seems like kind of your mastering, your LP business kind of reinvented itself then maybe at that point in time? Because when you first took over, were you doing LPs in the very beginning?
you mean with Jim Davis?
When Jim Davis took over, excuse me.
We started out with that in mind and hired Stan and Tim and Paul
Stan.
Stubblebine.
I feel like from memory, the very first things that were done back in the day were CDs.
That's correct.
And the LPs were definitely few and far between back in
The
the day.
earliest SACD releases under Jim Davis's ownership were the 3 Patricia Barber titles, which were then followed by things by Sonny Rollins, +4, the Kinks, Everybody's in Showbiz.
The Amy Mann stuff came up.
Amy Mann stuff came out a bit
Isaac
later.
Hayes was
Isaac Hayes was very
Hot
that's
Buttered
a
Soul,
Hot
baby.
Buttered Soul.
Great album.
So yeah,
it came out on vinyl as well, but it seems like
that
from
was
memory,
later. That was
later. It seems from memory that the vinyl back then, so you never got rid of it, but it was few and far between at the time.
Yeah, it got really, really skinny, and then Hot Buttered Soul, Lost in Space, Amy Mann. That was the very start of the new era.
That Amy Mann's great stuff.
Oh, and then the Madeline Peru stuff that you cut with Stan, right?
Yeah.
And you
The
did Bachelor
Alison
number
Krauss
2,
stuff.
not
We
to
did
mention.
that. Man, that's
3
incredible
different
sounding record.
Yes.
Gary Pozzosa,
Yeah.
the
Very hard to get.
producer.
Very
I bet.
collectible.
Yeah.
It seems to me that let's call it the first decade of Jim Davis's ownership from 2001 until 2011 were sort of the more vinyl light, I might say. We were still putting out the product, but there wasn't this chasm in terms of the amount of records sold LP vis-a-vis SACD. The boom really kind of came around, I'd say, after 2010, maybe.
Well, you would know
Well,
that.
you would definitely know that.
Yeah, I think for me, putting Mobile Fidelity on the map was, I think, when the Miles Davis catalog, when you pulled, not just the Miles Davis catalog, excuse me, when you started pulling in licenses from the Cars, it was multi-titles, Billy Joel, the Billy Joel, the Cars, Bob Dylan, and Miles Davis. For me, that was a different
The first time
era.
we did the Cars was 2009. Billy Joel came in 2010.
I'd love to do that car stuff on One Step.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, we got to do every record, but
man.
except Panorama.
Yeah.
We've done all of them. And Door to Door.
You and I just kept pushing Jim Davis to,
Come
to do
on.
more and more cars.
Well, I mean, if
Drove
you're
him
gonna
crazy.
skip anything,
Yeah.
I think we could skip Door to Door, but it would have been nice as a complete catalog. But
We'll do a Cars box set
a box
on
set,
One
yeah.
Step.
Has there ever been any thought to a box set?
Oh,
I mean, that's
always.
something that's rich in your history.
Absolutely. There's always thoughts about that when it comes to...
We have a lot of thoughts, Mike.
Yeah. Everything gets considered. And not a lot of,
Not everything
a
gets
fraction
acted
of
on,
the...
but
Yeah, exactly. Right?
We're
We're
considering
dreamers.
everything.
We're always considering. You look at something like we've done so many, like, look at the Cars, perfect example. We've done pretty much every song that's on the greatest hits, except for the song that I think is exclusive to it, Tonight She Comes. Wouldn't it be great to do the Cars' greatest hits? That'd be a breeze at this point.
It's a natural, yeah.
It's a total natural, but sometimes the record label doesn't agree. And when I say that, I mean not us, but
The Heartbeat City, that brings up a interesting. Sorry to start spinning it, but this is going to happen. The Heartbeat City, the leader
The Gaps.
that was the Gaps in there, that it clearly marked on the tape box to take those out. They were leadered for the singles,
Right.
so it's just like read your instructions.
Yeah. And we caught that. I'm sure you know about that whole, you seem to know a lot about
Debacle.
the past and
Yes,
and controversies
Mhm.
with previous releases. I'm sure you know about the whole Beat City thing.
I do.
Yeah. And that was a perfect example of somebody just taking the tape and not going beyond the reel and going, okay, this is the master. It's exactly as it's supposed to be. Away we go. And no, there are notes, and there could be notes saying to reverse the channels. There could be notes like Pretender's brass and pocket. This must be very sped. There could be notes about calibration, and in many cases, remove this leader. I mean, it's not uncommon. It's actually very common to receive a master tape for which there were hit singles or not hit singles, where they have inserted leader so as to be able to cut directly from the tape on the master reel.
Mhm.
I don't know if you understand how that works exactly, but you need to have some, let's call it bumper, before and after the track, so you can isolate it
Mhm.
from the rest of the side, so you can cut a 7-inch 45
Hit play and get your lathe going.
and get right,
Yeah.
and not
Right, yeah.
you know, and you can't start it from the very first second of the audio. You need to lead up
Correct.
to it. Well, you don't want to have
You have to
the
cut a
track
lead in,
before.
right?
You have to have blank paper or plastic
Mhm.
leader before it to do it correctly. Anyway, they will typically, either it's laziness or just what have you, they won't take that leader back out of the tape. So when you access that tape 40 years later, oh, there's this extra space between tracks 1 and 2, track 2 being the single.
Mhm.
And you've got to be sharp enough to go, well, let's listen to the original LP. What's the gap on that between the songs? And then you match that.
Match the gap spacing.
Well, one of the
Yeah.
things that we do have is the luxury of time. We say this over and over, but it's true. And using the DSD, the 4X DSD transfers, allows us that opportunity to do incremental adjustments, and you're not constrained by trying to do something on the fly, or the story I told earlier about the Roy Orbison's greatest hits.
Right.
It took the two of us together to make that work, because there were some level adjustments where the repro had to be run all the way up to the max. One
In
song,
dreams.
there's no way that you could do it as one guy.
No.
Yeah.
You'd have to be an octopus
hit the
to do
spread,
it.
change the EQ, change the azimuth, and crank
Yeah.
you can't.
And you make a very good point that I'd like to, embolden, and that is that time. I would much rather have a copy tape. Let's say, and I don't, this is not saying we use copy tapes. I would rather have a copy tape and all the time in the world than the master tape in a day.
Mhm.
Because if you're not doing your job properly, the master tape is completely irrelevant. And I'm sure you can understand that just intrinsically. It makes sense.
Mhm.
I'd rather do my best job with a copy of the master tape than a rush job with the master tape itself. And being that we make the release schedule, there's nobody saying, and another thing, we don't call a mastering facility and say, hey, we'd like to book time. Can we come in? What's your hourly rate? And then somebody hears, oh, this is going to cost $2,000 to master. Get in there. You got 4 hours, Shawn. We're on the clock. Do it. That doesn't happen. There have been times, literally, where I'll just have, and this is not uncommon at all, we're always here, but I'll just be bored on a Saturday night. I don't have anything to do. I don't want to watch another movie. I'll come in here and work on my current album project. And it makes it feel
What I'd be doing.
yeah. Right, wouldn't you?
Right.
It makes
TV's
it
getting
feel
stale.
it truly makes it a homemade, handmade endeavor, and that just feels good. That when you walk away from the project at the end, you can say, no stone was unturned. I wasn't rushed. Did I forget to dot that I or cross that T? No, I didn't, because I was given all the time to check that stuff.
Krieg is here a lot. Krieg spends a lot of time there.
Yeah.
You seem to have this place. I see you have your electronics workbench here, so you
Yeah.
seem like you are here quite a bit of time. See the toolbox there. I guess it probably is beneficial having a guy who can work on your gear in house.
We've had before and after, and I would agree with that.
We
You
have,
know,
yeah.
where we've had to call someone. It's not like we haven't had maintenance,
Mhm.
but where we haven't just had them right
Here.
here. And that makes a ton of difference. And also we get to learn so much in the process. I certainly do.
But probably too. I mean, I would imagine it prevent issues from taking place. Like
in the first place.
if
Yeah.
something is slightly off, you got a guy on site that
Absolutely.
can catch it, fix it.
I could literally say, Krieg, is my tape machine operating perfectly? And he can say yes or no. And if he says no, he can say now it is, which is great. So thanks, Krieg.
So we were talking a little too earlier, and my initial reaction was, if you have the ability to do this, why not just go to Sony? Why not make a copy of that tape? You're not a fan of that idea at all, are you, Krieg?
A copy of
A copy.
Make
so
an analog.
Make an analog copy, 30 hips tape, and cutting from that.
That is the 30 IPS analog.
Or a tape of any.
Of any sort, is not actually as accurate as the 4X DSD. It's truly a very transparent format, and with the pre-emphasis and de-emphasis in the analog tape machine, yes, it is analog, but it is another generation of analog that it's another thumbprint between the master tape and the lathe. And it's a thumbprint that we really don't want.
You've tried it.
Yeah,
we've tried
yes.
it. Auditioned several different 30 IPS, 15 IPS, 1 inch, half inch, Dolby SR, no Dolby, all of these things. They all have, maybe in some cases it's a little bit of a benefit. In other cases, well, it does change things. And it is best in this case to get absolutely as close to the master tape as you can to not change things. And then bring that to the lathe and let it do its magic.
So let me ask you a question. Out of the One Step series, your most well-reviewed series that you guys have done in the last 5-6 years, what's your favorite title that you've done? What have you been the most impressed with?
You and your good questions.
No, I don't know if that's a good
Brutal.
question, but I'm
That's good,
curious.
that's
Yeah, picking your favorite child.
Well,
Yeah.
I know sometimes when I listen to a record personally, the difference between the second best copy and the first best copy, sometimes it's small, sometimes it's a huge margin. Was there anything that you were impressed that you were able to get the results you were able to get?
Well, Abraxas definitely stands out.
You did it on 33 as well.
Yeah.
Not as good.
Wait, did we?
You did it on 33.
I think I cut that.
As an OMR,
I can't
as a
remember.
Standard OMR.
I
original
apologize.
master recording. That's right. That was.
You didn't do it as good.
Got 2 words for you, Mike, and it's
I'm
not
sorry.
happy birthday.
I'm sorry. But it was redone, and was there a difference? Do you remember if the original was done DSD? The 33?
Oh, yeah.
The 33 was done DSD.
Pretty sure it was.
It was.
We're going back to 2008 there. I can't remember. I know you worked on it, but
Pretty sure.
It was a big.
You know, it's
you're
hard to
right.
remember
I'm
because,
sure you're right.
I've actually handled that tape multiple times over the
That
years.
tape was here in 92. That tape
It
was
was.
first accessed by MoFi for the Ultra Disc in 92.
Yeah.
At which point they had to call Fred Cotero
Yep.
to
Spoke with him.
verify. I think he still lives in San Francisco, to verify channel orientation because the LP and the master tape did not match in that regard. So, Fred, what's correct?
Boy, is he a character.
Yeah.
Funny guy.
So Santana sticks out for you.
There are a few that stick out. Actually, Nightfly. I know it's not your favorite.
Not
But,
my favorite. I respect it.
That's a great
we
thing about the
spent
catalog.
we spent a lot of time working on Nightfly, trying to figure out whether that was originally recorded 3M digital, which is a whole different. I think what we used was a transfer from the analog outputs of a 3M digital recorder. If you can find a 3M digital recorder where the repros are precisely calibrated, the analog outs are going to be better. There was another title that we did from 3M digital where actually the digital outputs from that machine, we had to go through an incredible dance to get that
Local hero.
Local hero.
Yeah. Correct.
The digital outs from the machine sounded better than the analog outs because there was some miscalibration of the analog outs.
Mhm.
And let's see, to convert that to do a format conversion on that was a very complicated process.
We're no stranger to the differing digital formats, the X80s, the X86s that we've used over the years, the 3M.
3M.
Well, 3M uses a
DATs,
50 kilohertz sample rate, and so what we had to do was trick a machine into thinking it was playing a 48 kilohertz tape and then vary speed it.
Mhm.
See, one thing that I think is worth noting is that, because I'm a consumer too. We all used to just be consumers, right? I mean, like we became engineers, but I'm still a consumer. Consumers want things to be very black and white. Is it analog? Is it digital? Is it flat? Did you EQ it? Is it compressed? Is it not compressed? Because that's easy to comprehend. And there's a psychological satisfaction that derives from that certainty. The reality is that it's never that black and white, almost never that black and white. If somebody says, did you transfer that flat? Well, that to me means that I didn't equalize it. Okay, yes, no, it's transferred flat. Well, what was the calibration of my reproducing amplifier? Was that flat?
Mhm.
Okay, flat to what? To an MRL calibration.
Calibration tape. Yeah.
To the project tones that came with that master tape. Who defines flat? What defines flat?
Mhm.
All of these things are factors that understandably the average consumer should not consider. It's when we're approached by those consumers and they want answers that it becomes, well, we'd love to give those to you, but it's actually a long story. It's not yes or no. It's not black or white. There's a story. And we appreciate this opportunity to tell it to you, because this is really nice to sort of clear air and increase transparency and trust, really.
And I do appreciate this. I mean, and ultimately, I know you guys must think, I mean, does it sound good? Why are you here asking me these questions? I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do it,
because you care.
They do sound great. A lot of the titles. I'm not a fan of everything that's been done, but a high percentage of the stuff you guys have put out have been dynamite titles. And I think it'd be really hard for a lot of people to disagree with some of that. And I think the main focus here, and the thing that I would like to see is, and you guys have agreed to do this, coming forward, we're just going to have all that information as consumers.
If I can borrow a phrase from you, a very wise man, I'll return it. Borrow it, I'll return it, is, the proof is in the pudding.
Yes.
And that's very true. It's, there are certain tapes that, on the one-step process, you don't want to play repeatedly. That's not the best thing for the tape.
And if we can't get the tapes, well, we can't put out the records, and that wouldn't sound very good, would it?
It wouldn't. That sounds like being out of business.
No,
I don't
I agree.
that.
Like, if we were to not be doing the process that you guys are doing, we would have never had Abraxas. We would have never had that Marvin Gaye one step.
That's correct.
So I know a lot of people are split on this issue, but I think the best answer for everybody is we know what it is. We make it get to buy. We get to, as consumers, buy what we want to buy. I think a very high percentage of those consumers, I myself included, are going to buy it based on how it sounds and what the final product is. But knowing it for sure definitely eliminates, any apprehension I think anybody might have. And I appreciate you guys coming forward and telling me. I know everything kind of popped off last week in a wild fashion, and it went down very, very quick. And I appreciate you having me here, one working day after this went, and kind of answered that question. But, and it's been speculated for a while, so, I mean, we're putting that to bed. But the one steps have been the DSD transfers. I mean, that's how we're getting around playing those tapes multiple times.
Over and over and
Thriller
over.
is going to be a DSD transfer.
That's correct.
And I appreciate it. You actually, you were talking with me a little bit earlier about Thriller, and you were showing me, you showed me a video of when you made that transfer, and you had some issues you had to work with on that tape. So
there's always issues, Mike.
There's always issues.
Mm-hmm.
But
issues are like tissues. You pull up one, there's one right behind it.
So you guys are part engineers, part
Comedians.
Or comedians. Well, I don't know about the comedian part,
No,
but
couldn't make a living at
there's
it.
some detective work to what you guys do as well, trying to suss out the past and figure out how to unscrew some of the stuff that's been done over the decades. I think that's fair to say.
Getting the tape machine properly aligned to the actual program, or we may have mentioned this already, but I have memory loss.
Because unlike television, unlike monitors, there was never really any standardization of that in the past, was there?
There was.
There is.
I mean,
It just that as you and I had a discussion
Yes.
about you recording with Mark Knopfler in different studios, and the tape machines having slightly different alignments.
that's what I mean when I say that it wasn't standardized from studio to studio to
It
studio.
was supposed
Yeah,
to be.
yeah.
It was supposed to be, but it just never was.
Studios tend to have their own standard, especially when they were owned by record companies. You know, EMI, Decca.
So you
Things
might
like
find
that.
a label had more of a standard than.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Rather than an independent.
So when
studio.
everything was being done in house, it didn't matter. It all worked out.
Oh, that which
Decca,
is
for example, designed their own repro amps for their studios.
right.
It was
And-
a Decca standard. They designed their own digital standard, but in-house.
And very often, I'm sure you may or may not know this, but before the independent recording studio came to prominence, master tapes that were made at record company owned studios would not have calibration tones on them, because where else was that tape going to be played?
In-house.
In-house.
Yeah.
So project tones that are printed on master tapes started with record labels like, not record labels, recording studios like Record Plant, Electric Lady, Sunset Sound. That's where you're going to find a situation where, okay, this is going to be played elsewhere. And they're going to need to be able to calibrate to our settings, the
But
ones that we have.
Those tones, you have 1K, 10K,
Mhm.
and 100. And there's a lot going on between those frequencies. That's where the
Generally.
music lives.
That's true.
And
That's
so
true.
So I asked you earlier on this, some of my favorite titles you guys have done with the Dire Straits. You shipped your gear over to Abbey Road to do those transfers?
That's correct.
What was that like?
Working in Abbey Road?
Yeah. I mean,
Are you
was that-
kidding?
Well, I'm not kidding, but I'm not going to get to do it, so I'm going to have to ask you what it was
Actually,
like.
I got to play the drums in the Beatles studio and with a band that works in a house.
Did you really?
I did,
You're not
yeah.
joking.
Yeah, I have video of
I don't think you
that.
even
Yeah,
told me Studio 2?
yeah,
Wow.
and that was fun. It's an incredibly historic place, and they have a bunch of the original gear in the hallways that you get the red console, you know, the
Oh,
Studer
God.
C37s, the et cetera. But the one thing that I really wanted, they denied me, was I wanted to see some of the Beatles Masters, and they said, no. I said, you know, we're the only company to have ever had those Masters out of here at EMI, and they said, we're aware of that.
So
Can't blame me.
I
for
said, can I
trying.
look through like the window, you know, as the guy with the, no.
So even as a
Right.
guy who's touched many, many of those tapes, that was kind of like the holy, to be able to see them would have been,
I would have drooled,
it would have been
I'm
exciting.
sure, on the tapes.
Anyone.
And
So one of the things you showed me, and I found it impressive, and granted it was only a box, is you still have the original tape box here, the metal can that was used to bring those back
Yep.
from England here.
It's one of a few. We have a few of those new metal cans. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. But they're
Krieg
still-
showed me the notes. I mean, you guys still have an amazing documentation of Stan's mastering choices. I mean, everything was. It was.
I believe we have every single the page of every single.
I mean, I looked
set
at
of
Help. I
master
personally knew very little about what I was looking at, but I felt that there was, for me, it was, you know, there's some significance to the fact that you guys were able to keep hold of all that.
There's a lot of
It is
history
very
here.
cool.
There's a lot of
You know,
history. I mean,
That
yeah.
that lineage comes right from Stan, runs right through us,
Mhm.
and that's the philosophy of the company comes from. And you know, I wasn't around back in the 70s here, but there weren't reissue departments back then when a record company was done with an album and it wasn't selling
it.
anymore. They just had the artist record a new album and then that would sell through. And Mobile Fidelity, not to take credit for this entire market, but we shone a light on using the original master tape and going back to that and then
100%.
reissuing
And
things.
there's been a lot of labels that have started doing it since, but no, you're right. I mean,
Imitation being the sincerest form of
what
flattery.
Rhino and all these reissue labels that, you know, there's
They do a
in-house-
great job.
There's in-house labels doing it now.
Sure,
There's
yeah.
other audiophile boutique labels, but
And that's the thing. Like if we, you know, it doesn't.
you guys were.
It's nice if you could influence others to go, oh, this is important.
It
And
is
then,
cool,
and then they do that. It's like, sure. I mean, like, because as a consumer myself, I get to benefit from the fact that another record label goes, we should be doing that, and then maybe that's a record that we don't get to license,
Mhm.
so we get a great version from another label. That's cool. That's very
A
cool.
rising tide.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of
right.
music out there. There's a lot of stuff that
Great
We can't do
stuff.
it all. You know, we'd love
Like
to,
to.
but we can't do. Yeah, we can't do it all. As much
We
as
did
we'd
the
love to.
Miles catalog, and I will say, as a big jazz fan, the Miles catalog is my favorite bit of reissues.
Oh, very cool.
It's tough to say. I don't know. The Blue Note Tone Poet stuff.
Good stuff.
But as a whole, from a singular artist, that Miles Davis stuff has stood the test of time. And I've often thought, you know, being as I have a background in selling records, you can kind of always get reconfirmation on your guys' work by the value of some of the stuff in the secondary market.
Yeah.
And when you see
Oh.
the value of some of those records in the secondary market, I think that is confirmation that other people agree.
I was in Amoeba in LA in April,
Bless
and
you. Sorry.
and I think I saw something. You know, they put things up on the wall of fame, kind of thing, if you will. And something I cut maybe a decade ago was up there, and I mean, it wasn't even sealed, and I was like,
How much?
"You could have mine for that."
How much would you buy that for? I'm coming back.
Seriously,
It's
I
kind of
remember.
staggering.
I remember seeing a sealed box of those. You know,
Yes.
boxes and boxes. It's like it is flattering. And
I think we
And
have
there's-
20 test pressings of that.
Hey,
Right?
hey,
Or-
hey.
I'm sorry. I'm
And, you
sorry.
know, at the end of all of this, you know, I just feel like I
Mike.
relate because at the end of the day, we know that our consumers, you know, it's a touching plight that they have, you know, like you and us.
Passionate
all-
people definitely
passionate people-
cause the most
Mhm.
uproar.
No
And
question.
the people that
But
don't
we-
care are the ones that you never hear from.
Exactly. But the passion comes
Well
from the
put.
simple fact in this case that all you, and I'm stepping out on a limb here, but I suspect that all you want is to hear your favorite music sounding the best.
The
that it
best
can.
it can.
Yeah.
And
I think that covers the whole
covers it.
desire.
and how
so-
you arrived at that. And I think we're there at this point going
Yeah.
forward.
Well, great.
So I really appreciate it. I hope you guys invite me back anytime.
Thanks
it was
for
a very
coming on.
short, well, it was my pleasure. Really, I truly mean that. It was a very quick plane ride over here and a very cool experience. From a teenager, you know, I remember going to a flea market actually and seeing that Nirvana Nevermind
Oh,
old
wow.
Fidelity record. And
Great
it was,
record.
It was
Wow.
$30, and I want to say this was in 1997, 98.
That's what it would have been that now.
And I remember, well, it was a little bit more, because I think maybe, I don't know what the retail was at the time, but I remember seeing
It was
that.
$29.99.
And I was dirt poor, and I could never afford $29.99.
That was the
but I-
Anadisc 200.
and it's just 200. I remember seeing that and thinking to myself, boy, I'd love to own that. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I had to buy it at a much higher price. But it is kind of a surreal experience being in the room that record was cut in.
That's exactly
And it
right.
was pressed 2 blocks down the
Two
road.
blocks down the
in a
road,
place that
and
is
it's-
now a gym.
So it is kind of
Wow.
cool for me as a fan of music in general, and as vinyl in general, and as audiophile stuff in general, to kind of come to the place where the audiophile, you know, the audiophile vinyl was really born. So I appreciate that. I hope you have me back.
Thanks,
you.
Mike.
Pleasure, Mike.
Nice meeting
Nice to
all
meet
of you.
you.
Thanks for
Thanks,
being here.
Krieg.
Thanks for
Mike.
this opportunity.
All right.